I recently started making my own wine and mead. I already got a few bottles that need to be stored and aged. One of my viewers asked me to build a wine shelf, so this is the perfect timing. I went to the lumber store and purchased some soft maple. You can build your wine shelf out of any type of wood. Mine will be the centerpiece of a room, so I wanted to have something a little nicer. The first step is to cut all the pieces to size, so lessons anfangen. First, I had to come up with a design for the wine rack. I wanted something that incorporated resin, LED lights, and stored around 100 bottles. Once I had the design figured out, it's time to cut the wood into the right size pieces. You will need 180 pieces that are 2 by 2 by 27 centimeters, 11 pieces that are 2 by 3.5 by 100 centimeters, 16 pieces that are 2 by 3.5 by 112 centimeters, and for the top, you will need one large piece that is 112 centimeters by 27 centimeters. The easiest way to cut the pieces is with a combination of a miter saw and a table saw. First, I cut the long pieces into smaller ones, so the pieces are easier to handle once I rip them on the table saw. Make sure you double count the pieces to end up at the correct amount. To cut 180 pieces of 27 centimeters, I clamped the stop block to the miter saw, so I do not have to measure each piece individually. I finally finished cutting all of the pieces. I have 180 pieces by 27 centimeters long. I have 11 pieces by 100 centimeters long, and I have 16 pieces by 112 centimeters long. The next step is to take the 27 centimeter long pieces and round over 2 of the edges. I'm going to use my router table to do that. That means I have to do 360 sides. Let's get started on that one. Work smarter, not harder. It is very important to have each side identical to the other side. So to assemble the wine rack, I build a template. Just insert the pieces of wood, use some wood glue and a nail gun to assemble. All done. Now it's time for the final steps. Use a spacer to get an equal distance between the shelves before you use a screw to attach them. Make sure you pre-drill all the holes. Use a pencil to draw a curvy line onto the board. This will assemble the resin river. Use a jigsaw to cut along the lines to split the wood. Use a sander to round over the edges. Please use a desk mesh too. This could pass as a river, don't you think so? I'm in my craft studio and it's time to pour some resin. I will not only pour the resin river, but I also build a form for a small ledge that will keep the bottles from sliding off the display. I broke a long piece of wood into multiple pieces and I will fill those cracks with resin. I will also incorporate an LED lighting strip. For the resin, I'm using Total Board tabletop epoxy. Insert the broken pieces of the maple into the form, then fill with resin. Wear some gloves, either wear a respirator or be in a very well ventilated area when working with resin. And you know what's next. Resin dance!
resin into the forms. For the resin river, only fill in about a 1/4 inch, since I like to add wine corks once the resin dries to a sticky consistency. Use the heat gun to pop any bubbles. Now the resin has dried enough so I can add the corks and add another layer of resin on top of it. It's the next day now and the resin has dried. It's time to demold the forms. A little muscle power will do the trick. Well, that wasn't too bad and it came out great. Let's take it to the workshop. James from Maven Safety Shoes sent me a pair of steel-toe sneakers. They are pink and they protect my toes. Use the planner to shave down the piece for the ledge. Sadly, the top piece won't fit in the planner, so we'll have to hand sand it. Use the table saw to cut a 22-degree angle on the top piece, so it will sit flush with the front trim. I used my belt sander to roughly take off all the extra resin, so that the surface of the board is flush. After, sand it down to 600 grit. Make sure you wipe off as much resin dust as you can. It can add unnecessary scratches to the surface. Also, have some fun with it. Then use some water to wet sand the resin up to 3000 grit. I ended up having a big bubble trapped in the ledge and it turned into a big hole. To fill it, I will use Total Boat UV Cure Resin. It dries within minutes with the use of a UV light. After it's dried, use the sander to sand it down. Looks like it never happened. The top part is all done. Let's fit it onto the wine rack to make sure it fits. Yes, it fits. Oh, I'm sorry, excitement took over. Now I wanted to make it extra special by adding LED lights. To do this, I cut a small groove on the bottom side of the ledge, so I can cover the LED lights with it to get a sleek, clean appearance. I used my router table to do this. Stick the LED lights onto the wood. Make sure it's straight. Dry fit the cover over it. Then use the epoxy glue to glue it on permanently. Spread the glue in a thin, even layer. Then take off any excess. On the back side of the glue it states that clamps are not needed, but I will use them anyways. Better safe than sorry. I decided to angle the screws and attach them from the bottom, so the screws won't be visible from the top. Make sure you pre-drill the wood, otherwise it will crack. Remember that piece I cut off the top to angle it? Well, I need something to keep the bottles from rolling off the rack, so this will be perfect. It's time to apply the finish. I'm using Rubio Monocoat. Let the finish dry and we are fertig. Now all that's left to do is to fill it with wine bottles. How do you like the wine rack? Please leave me a comment below. Thank you so much for watching. Tschüss!